Last month, I stopped answering my father's calls. It wasn't stubbornness, it was survival. Blood tests revealed strontium, vanadium, and traces of rat poison in my body. My dad had been adding things to my food for months, pretending it was all in my head. Now, after nearly killing me, he wants to meet, one last time, to talk about inheritance. My relatives say I should go, that money could change my future. But I've seen what happens when I take even one sip of water in his house. The question is, do you risk your life for blood ties? For most of my 20s, I lived with Crohn's disease like it was a silent shadow. Painful, yes, but manageable, as long as I followed the rules. No rice, no potatoes, no reckless eating. I had learned to live cautiously, keeping a careful balance between flare-ups and remission. My mom understood, my grandmother understood. Even my doctors, after months of testing and scopes and endless waiting rooms, confirmed it was real. But my dad? He brushed it off with a smirk. It's all because you ate too many lemons years ago, he would say, as if a chronic illness could be reduced to citrus fruit. That was the first wall between us. Not just disbelief, but contempt. Still, I tried to push through. I focused on my goal, getting into a master's program abroad. It wasn't just a dream, it was an escape route. In April, I finally received the acceptance letter. It felt like proof that despite my body's betrayals, I was still capable of carving out a future. My mom was overjoyed, my relatives on her side cheered. But when I told my father and my older brother, the air shifted. My dad's face hardened. My brother sneered. Are you planning to beg in that country once you fail? That was the second wall, not illness, but ambition. They didn't want me to leave, not because they cared about my health, but because they couldn't stand the idea of me outgrowing them. At first, I thought I could just ignore their bitterness. But then the symptoms returned. Cramps twisted my stomach every night. Vomiting left me weak, dizzy. It didn't make sense. I was still avoiding my trigger foods, still following every doctor's instruction. The pain was relentless, growing sharper each day. One night, after dragging myself home from class, I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach drop. My father was standing in the kitchen, a room he never used, holding my glass of milk. His hand hovered, sprinkling something white into it. He looked up, startled, and set the glass down as if nothing happened. My mom and I exchanged a look, silent but heavy. That was the third wall, suspicion. From then on, food became a battlefield. My mom and I locked up the cabinets, bought new ingredients, ate at my grandmother's house. And when we did, my body calmed. The pain eased. The bloating faded. But every time I returned home, it came back. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, that maybe I was paranoid. But then came the nosebleeds. Then came the strange taste of rust in my water. Then came the blood test results that made my hands shake as I read them. Everything was about to change. The first real sign that something was terribly wrong didn't come from a doctor's chart. It came from a cookie jar. I'd forgotten to lock it one night. It seemed harmless at the time, just a small jar of store-bought cookies left sitting on the counter. The next morning, I grabbed 2 before class. Within an hour, my stomach was in knots. By lunch, I was doubled over in the bathroom, vomiting until I saw streaks of blood. It wasn't just another flare-up. This felt poisoned, because it was. I told myself it had to be stress, or maybe contaminated food. But deep down, I knew the truth. The cookies were fine when I bought them. The only thing that had changed was that they'd been left exposed in our kitchen overnight. Later that evening, my mom admitted she had noticed her own coffee tasting strange. Twice she had forced it down to be polite when my dad handed it to her, and twice she'd ended up in bed with cramps and dizziness. That wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. We decided to test it. For 2 days, we ate exclusively at my grandmother's house. No symptoms, no pain. My body felt like it was waking up from months of torture. Then, on the 3rd day, I slipped. I drank water at home, just 1 glass. 2 nights later, blood poured from my nose and trickled from my mouth. That was the moment I stopped lying to myself. This wasn't Crohn's. This wasn't stress. This was my father. The worst part? He didn't even try to hide it anymore. I caught him jiggling the lock on the cabinet we'd bolted shut. I found the refrigerator seal pried open. A thin white powder lingered on my plate one morning, almost invisible, but unmistakable once I saw it. And when I confronted him with a trembling voice, not even an accusation, just a simple, "What are you doing?" He looked at me with calm, blank eyes and said, "Stop imagining things. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't denial. It was amusement. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just sick. I was unsafe. Once you notice one crack in the wall, you start to see them everywhere. That's what it felt like in our house. Every meal, every sip of water, every innocent spoonful of sugar came with a silent question. Is this safe? My mom and I turned the kitchen into a fortress. We bought fresh supplies, locked the cabinets, and even carried our own food from my grandmother's place. But the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a trap waiting to be reset. The little signs kept piling up. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found the refrigerator door slightly ajar. The lock we had added was bent, as if someone had forced it open. Another morning, I stirred sugar into my tea and noticed a faint metallic tang that made me spit it out immediately. My mom wrinkled her nose after a sip of her coffee and whispered, "He's changing it again." We stopped pretending. We both knew. But the hardest part wasn't avoiding the food. It was enduring his behavior. My father had suddenly developed an odd fascination with the kitchen, a place he had avoided his whole life. I'd walk in and find him rearranging jars or wiping the counter, like a burglar staging the scene. He acted casual, but his eyes flicked toward me, sharp and mocking, as if daring me to call him out. And then there was my brother. He came by one weekend, stayed for dinner, and pushed his plate away untouched. He barely looked at me, avoided conversation, and left without explanation. My mom whispered afterward, "He knows." Whether he was complicit or just cowardly, I couldn't decide, but the silence felt like betrayal. Meanwhile, my body was caught in a cruel game of cause and effect. At my grandmother's house, I was fine. Back at home, the nausea and cramps returned almost instantly. It was like flipping a switch, undeniable proof that someone, my father, was tampering with what I consumed. Still, a part of me hesitated. I didn't want to believe it fully. I wanted to cling to the possibility that maybe my disease was simply unpredictable, maybe stress was playing tricks on me. Because admitting the alternative, that my own father was deliberately poisoning me, felt like tearing the ground out from under my feet. But then something happened that made denial impossible. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint metallic rattle of a lock. At 2:17 a.m., I heard it, the soft scrape of metal on wood. I sat up, heart pounding, and crept down the hall. The kitchen light was off, but the glow from the refrigerator spilled faintly across the tile. My father was crouched in front of the locked cabinet, screwdriver in hand, muttering under his breath. The sight froze me where I stood. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. He pried the latch, reached inside, and pulled out a sealed container of sugar we had bought just 3 days earlier. From his pocket, he produced a folded packet. White dust spilled as he pinched it between his fingers and sprinkled it in. He shook the jar, careful and deliberate, then slid it back as though nothing had changed. I must have made a sound, a sharp inhale, a scuff of my foot, because he turned his head slowly. Our eyes locked across the dim kitchen. For a moment, neither of us moved. His face didn't show guilt or fear, only annoyance, like I'd interrupted a private ritual. "What are you doing?" My voice cracked, trembling. He straightened, pocketed the packet, and smirked. "Stop imagining things. Go back to bed." But I couldn't unsee it. My hands shook so violently I gripped the doorway to steady myself. My chest ached with a mixture of rage and disbelief. This wasn't a flare-up. This wasn't bad luck. My father, the man who raised me, was the reason my body was breaking down. The next morning, I tried to tell myself it had been a nightmare, some hallucination fueled by exhaustion. But then I found it, a faint residue at the bottom of my tea cup, chalky against the porcelain. My mom found the same powder on her plate. We gathered everything suspicious into bags, the sugar, the salt, even unopened packets of cookies. My mom insisted we test them. I wanted to, but fear gnawed at me. What if it was something that couldn't be traced? What if he had already done irreversible damage? When I finally went for blood work, the results came back with levels that made the doctor frown, elevated traces of strontium and vanadium. But worse was the warning, signs consistent with anticoagulant poisoning. Rat poison. My blood ran cold. There was no denying it anymore. What I saw destroyed my world. Once you know the truth, it changes how you see everything. Suddenly, every detail becomes evidence, every word another weapon. It wasn't just me anymore. My mom began coughing after her morning coffee, clutching her stomach with the same cramps I knew too well. She admitted she'd ignored the bitter taste for weeks, forcing herself to drink what my father handed her so she wouldn't spark a fight. Now it was undeniable. She wasn't just collateral damage, she was a target too. That realization turned my fear into fury. Why? Why would a man poison his own family? The answer came 2 days later. We had just returned from my grandmother's house when my father cornered me in the hallway. His tone was casual, almost conversational. "So you still plan on leaving for that master's?" he asked, voice dripping with disdain. I told him yes, no matter what, I was going. He smiled thinly. "Something unexpected may happen. Your plan may fail." It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. My brother's behavior only confirmed it. He visited briefly, stood stiff in the living room, and refused to eat anything. When I asked if he wanted tea, he said nothing, just waved me off with a disgusted look. Later, my mom whispered, "He knows. He just doesn't care." The scale of it all hit me. This wasn't just sabotage of my health. This was sabotage of my future. The scholarship that mysteriously disappeared. The education loan suddenly denied. Every bureaucratic wall that rose in front of me felt suspiciously deliberate. My father had connections, relatives who worked in government offices, old favors he could call in. And now, the doors that should have opened for me were slamming shut. Food was no longer safe. Water wasn't safe. Even the air in that house felt tainted, heavy with hidden microphones and silent threats. My mom discovered a tiny recorder tucked beneath her dresser, proof that he was listening, watching, cataloging every word we said. We moved meals entirely to my grandmother's place, carrying bags of groceries like contraband, locking every door behind us. Still, my father prowled through the kitchen whenever he could, prying at locks, rearranging jars, as if to remind us he was always a step ahead. And yet, he never admitted a thing. He just smiled when we confronted him, like a man who knew the game was rigged in his favor. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't about illness. It wasn't even about poison. It was about power, and I was running out of time. For a brief stretch, it felt like we had found a way to survive. My mom and I abandoned the kitchen entirely. Every meal came from my grandmother's house. We carried groceries like smugglers, ate together in her tiny dining room, and locked everything away when we returned home. It wasn't freedom, but it was safety, or at least the closest thing to it. Days passed without pain. My stomach calmed. My mom's headaches eased. For the first time in months, we felt like we could breathe. I even dared to focus again on my master's paperwork, drafting emails to the university late at night, telling myself maybe this nightmare could be managed. But relief has a way of lulling you into danger. One afternoon, after forgetting my water bottle, I took a sip from the kitchen tap. The taste was metallic, sharp, and within 48 hours, I was bleeding from my nose and gums. At the hospital, the blood tests came back worse than before. Elevated traces of strontium and vanadium still clung to my system, but this time the doctor hinted at something darker, signs of an anticoagulant toxin. He looked me in the eye and said softly, "This is consistent with rat poison." The words made my skin crawl. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. My mom tried to stay strong, but I saw the way her hands shook when she washed the dishes, how she sniffed her coffee before every sip. At night, she whispered that she felt trapped in her own house, like a prisoner guarded by her husband's smile. Then came the final blow. My scholarship was suddenly revoked. The agency in charge claimed it was a clerical mistake, told me to wait a year and try again. My education loan, too, was mysteriously denied. One official even used the same phrase my father had sneered at me: "Stop living in a dream." The coincidence was too sharp to ignore. My father wasn't just poisoning my food. He was poisoning my future. For a moment, I thought maybe we could endure it. That if we just kept our distance, kept our meals elsewhere, we could ride out the storm until I left for Europe. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the end. It was only the eye of the hurricane. The night we decided to leave was the night everything spiraled. My mom and I had been whispering about it for weeks, packing quietly, planning where we could go, how to vanish without tipping him off. Living like this wasn't living at all. But it wasn't until I found the small microphone taped beneath my mother's dresser that we knew we couldn't wait any longer. He wasn't just tampering with our food. He was listening to every word we said. We left at dawn, carrying only what we could fit into 2 suitcases. My grandmother opened her door without a word, just pulled us inside, and for the first time in months, I slept without fear. But my father wasn't done. 2 days later, I returned to the old house to grab a folder of university documents I'd left behind. I was cautious, touching nothing, drinking nothing. Still, I slipped. I drank a glass of water from the kitchen sink, telling myself it would be fine. 48 hours later, I was spitting blood into the bathroom sink, my hands shaking as crimson streaks ran across porcelain. The hospital confirmed what I already feared. My blood showed the same pattern: strontium, vanadium, and signs of anticoagulant toxins. My mom's test results matched mine almost exactly. It was undeniable. The poison was inside both of us now. The doctors stabilized me, but the fear wouldn't leave. Every creak of the hospital bed felt like a countdown. My father had escalated beyond intimidation. This was attempted murder. And yet, when relatives confronted him, he admitted it with a shrug. It wasn't meant for him, he reportedly said, as if that excused it. Then he dangled the one hook he knew could still reach me. If he talks to me, I'll fund his masters. I feel guilty. My phone buzzed with his messages. I want to see you one last time. Understand my position. If not, you won't see me again. It was bait. I knew it. But the inheritance loomed in the background, whispered about by well-meaning relatives. Money that could change my future, if only I met him. If only I gave him one more chance to pull me back under his control. Bleeding, poisoned, betrayed, and now trapped in a choice between survival and blood ties. The storm had reached its peak. The message replayed in my head like a broken record. See me one last time. Understand my position. If not, you won't see me again. For a moment, I almost gave in. Not because I wanted reconciliation, that was impossible, but because of the inheritance. My relatives kept whispering in my ear, meet him. Secure what's yours. You don't have to forgive him. Just play along until the papers are signed. They made it sound so simple, like meeting a man who had nearly killed me was just another bureaucratic step. But then I thought about the glass of water that left me bleeding, about the white powder clinging to my plate, about the look in his eyes when I caught him crouched at the cabinet. Not fear, not guilt, but amusement. He didn't want reconciliation. He wanted control. The choice was mine: step back into his world and risk my life, or cut the cord completely. So I called him, just once. His voice came through calm, almost cheerful, as if we were discussing dinner plans. I knew you'd come around, he said. I let him talk, let him spin his excuses about stress, about how he never meant harm, about how I had imagined most of it. Then I cut him off. I know what you did. I saw it, and I'll never forgive you. You won't hear from me again. The silence on the other end was thick, suffocating. Then he laughed, low, bitter. You think you can live without me? You'll regret this. No, I said, steady this time. The only regret I'd ever have is drinking from your glass again. And I hung up. It felt like slamming a door on years of poison, not just the kind in my food, but the kind he'd fed me my whole life. Doubt, control, contempt. The fallout was immediate. My brother called me selfish, accused me of destroying the family. My father told relatives I was ungrateful and crazy, but the mask had slipped. Enough people knew the truth now: my aunt, my uncle, even my grandmother. And though they couldn't drag him into court, they couldn't look at him the same way again. I hadn't gotten my inheritance. I hadn't gotten his money for school. But I had something he couldn't take from me anymore: freedom. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. It's been weeks since that final call, and my phone has stayed silent. No more late-night texts. No more veiled threats disguised as fatherly concern. Just silence, the kind that feels heavy at first, but slowly turns into relief. I won't pretend it's easy. My scholarship was revoked, my loan denied, and the inheritance is still out of reach. Financially, the road ahead looks uncertain. But my mom gave me her savings, my professors encouraged me to keep applying, and I know I'll find a way. Because I'd rather start from zero than return to a house where water tastes like rust and trust is poisoned at the source. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the man he used to be, or at least the version I thought I saw. A father who took me to school, who fixed bikes in the garage, who told me I could be anything. Then I remember the residue on my plate, the blood in the sink, the smirk when he denied everything. Those two men don't reconcile. One of them never really existed. I've learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about choosing what you won't let kill you. And I chose to cut ties, no matter the cost. Maybe one day the law will catch up with him. Maybe karma will. Until then, I carry my own justice, distance, clarity, and the knowledge that I didn't let him win. So tell me, if your own blood turned toxic, would you risk everything for money or walk away with nothing but your life?